Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the launch of the Hydrogen Standard Global Governance Report. I'm the founder and executive director of the Hydrogen Standard, Johan Wiebe, and with me here today is Christina Abuchar, head of research. So a couple comments on housekeeping. The webinar will last about 20 minutes, and we can take some questions at the end. Feel free to put the questions in the chat, and then we will pick him up at the end. Before we delve into the report itself, a little bit about the Hydrogen Standard. So the Hydrogen Standard was founded in 2019, and it's first and foremost a platform that brings together all the information available on the web, and in combination with various products as well. So we can describe sort of our focus in three pillars at best. First is news and market insight. So news, we have a news section on the website which drags in various sources of news under one roof. Given the various developments in the industry are following up each other quickly and the momentum that the industry is currently having, it's a good place to stay up to date with the latest news recorded across the web. But at the same time, in that first pillar, we also provide market insights, where we have a global hydrogen monitor here displayed on the screen, and a China hydrogen and fuel cell monitor displayed on the screen as well. Global hydrogen monitor, it says it already in the name, focuses a little bit more on the global perspective with the developments on a monthly basis, whereas the China and hydrogen and fuel cell monitor focuses specifically on China. Rapidly developing market there, and a lot of different things happening, a lot of companies getting involved in sort of the hydrogen development, and we have someone on the ground who provides unique insights into that space. Now, both of these products are available for free. You can just register on the website and download them. We just want to make that information available to as many people as possible, so they can stay up to date with the progress in the market. Second is the industry advocacy, you would say, or the quarterly Hydrogen Standard magazine. And that is really a platform to allow people to tell their story and showcase their technological solutions. We've had 4 issues before. We have another issue, 5th issue, at the end of this year, by the end of this year. And it really sort of elevates the profile of the various companies in the space. And this covers across the complete value chain, from production, hydrogen distribution, storage, all the way to downstream uses in various industry, transport, and other places. And finally, then the third pillar is where we're here today, is the market research. And with the market research, we want to provide products that provide further insights and also analysis into sort of like the hydrogen space. And why we're here today is to talk about hydrogen research, is the Global Governance Report. And the Global Governance Report launch is a comprehensive piece of analysis that we did, consisting of about 100 slides, that basically looks at all the different governments across the world and accumulates all the information available that they have. So on a short-term, medium-term, and long-term basis. I mean, you almost cannot pass a day without some government across the world will update you on at least some commitment of some ambitions and some commitments in terms of rolling out the hydrogen roadmap. And it's difficult to keep track of all the different developments happening across the globe. So what we did, we brought it all together, we analyzed it all, and brought it all together into one product that provides you a global, a regional, and a country-specific overview of all the developments related to hydrogen across a couple of characteristics, across 3 time frames, short, medium, and long term. Right, again, as mentioned before, please stick to the end. We'll have a discount code for you there, so you can get it at a discount for purchase for the next 48 hours. After, it will be available, of course, as well at full price. And that, I think, is it for now for the introduction. Christina will take over now and will walk you through the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christina. Thank you, Johan, for the introduction. I'm very excited to be presenting this first edition of the Hydrogen Global Governance Report. This project has been in the works for some months now. There has been a lot of information circulating on the hydrogen industry over the past couple of years. The sector is expected to grow exponentially over the next 10 years and beyond. The Hydrogen Council projects that the hydrogen economy could generate $2.5 trillion in revenues and create up to 30 million jobs by 2030. The intention behind this report is to bridge the information gap between the global governance and the very optimistic outlook on the hydrogen industry. To this end, our approach has been to aggregate some of the most relevant sources of information to build an image of the hydrogen landscape. The key sections of this report are the global landscape, the regional overview, and the country profiles. For a little bit of insight on our methodology, while the report starts with the global landscape section, followed by the regional overviews, which are then broken down by country, we actually built the report in reverse. So we started with researching countries individually, and only after did we aggregate the information to create regional profiles, and then we put together these profiles to build a global landscape. Now that I've covered the how, we can move on to the why. In terms of ideology, we strongly believe in the power of policies and the considerable impact national and governmental institutions can have on the development of an industry. This is why we deemed it particularly important to build this overview. While the bulk of the funding effort will eventually come from the private sector, changes made by governments, regardless of their size, can influence investors' behavior and activities. There are several ways this can happen. For example, policies and programs signal public priorities, which in turn will encourage the private sector towards certain activities and areas. Regulations and standards can also define preferred activities. Tax incentives and subsidies are great tools to unlock private capital. Governments can also use procurement and grants to encourage better industry metrics. Finally, governmental agencies can collect and facilitate access to data for better programs, outcomes, and effectiveness. And indeed, the major factors limiting the hydrogen use in many of its applications today are economic rather than technological. There is still a lack of incentive to redirect funds, and this is why hydrogen is not yet cost competitive compared to conventional fuel options. For example, hydrogen used as heating fuel is 5 times more expensive than natural gas. Now that I've introduced our purpose and approach, I can get into some of the specifics of the report itself. I will start with the global landscape section. Throughout this section, we provide an analysis on some of the key themes that will define the future of the hydrogen industry. For the purposes of this presentation, we put together several snapshots, such as this one, of the different analyses we've worked on. Here, for example, we look at funding made available, which is based on data aggregated from the country profiles. Compared to the published global funding targets, the data reveals that while funding commitments are on the rise, they are not at par with the global funding needs. As the urgency of the climate crisis intensifies, we note a focus on short and medium-term commitments at the expense of the longer-term commitments. For example, today, medium-term commitments cover about 50% of global funding needs for 2030, but we have much less visibility on longer-term commitments, which cover less than 3% of long-term funding needs. These shortages reflect directly on the private market. A very telling number by the Hydrogen Council is that while project proposals are on the rise globally, less than 10% of hydrogen projects have actually reached a final investment decision. Moving on this slide, we look at an overview of funding distribution and classification from the short through the long term. The purpose here is to provide insight into the growth and spread of funding activity around the world. We've worked on this analysis to visualize which countries are committing, how much, and in which time frame. It helps us better understand how funding is growing and where it's concentrated. On the right-hand side, you can see it looks like commitments in the short term seem to be on the lower end, whereas they intensify rather quickly in the medium term. The medium and long-term heat maps will also be available in the report and will provide more insight into this type of redistribution. So in this first part of the global landscape, we draw out funding and start painting an image of the most active regions. Moving forward, we look into significant funding disbursements to provide direction on the key areas of activities within the hydrogen industry. The first sector we address here is capacity building through green hydrogen electrolyzers. It is a widely addressed sector by governments. On this particular slide, we can see the capacity rollout targets by regions in megawatts. Some elements that stand out in this type of visualization is, for example, the diminishing space Europe, the current leader, occupies in the longer term relative to other growing regions. We can see that China is establishing itself as a continental player. and the very surprising small space North America occupies, because despite being one of the major players in the energy field worldwide and having published a very ambitious roadmap recently, the United States, which is accounted for in North America, has mainly published targets in tons rather than watts to date, so the indications are a bit different on this level. Next, here we move on to mobility through two major investment areas that will tend to feed into each other. The visual on the bottom is the target for development of fuel cell vehicles broken down by type and region. Road vehicles are, as you can see, by far the major source of hydrogen demand in transport, and those are expected to feed directly into the hydrogen refueling stations rollout. Here again, while we can see that as it stands, Europe is a global leader, going forward towards the medium and longer term, it will occupy a much smaller space on the global scale. The shift will mainly be driven by China and the US. These themes are also drawn out and explored from different angles in the report, after which we move on to key industry drivers with a specific focus on areas with a governmental reach. We start here with a simple tabulation of announced policies and regulatory frameworks. It provides a straightforward overview of the nature of policies and incentives in each country. It indicates if a government has committed to a roadmap and provides insight as to which tools are the most employed globally within the hydrogen industry. This next slide explores one of the possible targets set for the hydrogen industry for a country. This is the share of primary energy generation target, and it is an example of what might be found in the policies and frameworks section. This type of hard national target indicates a solid commitment to phasing out fossil fuels, but also a pledge to promote hydrogen to a certain level or size. However, for hydrogen to reach these required levels, cost reduction as well as reliable and efficient performance are key. These hinge on supporting the innovative effort at scale and in a timely manner. The graph on the left-hand side provides insights into which countries are most invested in innovation. More details on the different projects will be found in the specific country profiles within the report. These projects and ventures feed directly into the positive evolution of the industry. On the right-hand side, there are heat maps that explore cost evolutions, which is a big contributor for the development of the industry. From the knowledge we've gathered to date, at this pace, this is what cost evolution would potentially resemble by 2050. Another key feature of the hydrogen industry is that it has so many applications, and this is why we cover sector development. The purpose is to offer an outlook. First, on the left-hand side, we look at which sectors are generating the most interest. In line with the major disbursement slides earlier, we can see here again that energy and mobility are at the top of the list. On the right-hand side is a visual expressing the discrepancy between intangible vision that countries often voice versus concrete plans and targets similar to the primary share of primary energy generation target and such that will indicate a real development of the sector. Very often, all these national areas of interest will overlap with international activities. So we've mapped out key trades, transfers, and collaborations worldwide. The report will include additional zoomed-in views of these exchanges. This mapping of the country's collaborative activities provides insight into the outlook of hydrogen flows around the world. It indicates where different countries are investing their resources and efforts. It clarifies areas of interest and partially reveals the aspiration of different countries, namely for trade. For example, we can notice if a country is more likely to be export or import oriented. But in addition to identifying the intensity and nature of activities across regions and countries, this geographical mapping also provides excellent insight into identifying potential gaps. This is where our introduction of the global landscape ends, and we move on to the regional profiles. This is a template of the typical regional profile. We divided countries by regions and aggregated the data to create regional overviews. We divided the regions by continent, but as you might have noticed from the global landscape introduction, we've chosen to profile China separately from the rest of Asia, because throughout our analysis, we have found that China, like in many other industries, operates on an almost continental scale. So the typical regional overview is divided into 3 sections. At the top, the framework, which outlines relevant happenings in the region that could impact the industry, and the potential clusters and alliances that within one region that can also impact the specific industry. The second, on the lower left-hand side, is an aggregation of funding, of the funding commitments in the region, which are this time broken down by country. We had seen them earlier broken down by region, now they are broken down by country. And on the third part of this overview, on the right-hand side, are some key milestones and targets defining the region's aspirations. Finally, our last slide is a prototype of a country profile in the report. In this section, we work on 8 categories that most likely affect the future of the hydrogen industry by 2050. Themes are very much aligned with what we cover in the global landscape. In this sense, we go in full circle to understand the information from all different viewpoints. Categories are organized around 2 main pillars: a defined timeline and tangible targets, which are essential tools to display an indicative planning horizon. The report will contain over 50 country profiles, encompassing all countries that have addressed hydrogen on a national level in any of its application and at any intensity or scale. So these profiles will be constantly updated, as Johan mentioned, and this wraps up our sneak peek into the global governance report for today. Now I leave the floor to Johan to end this introductory session and provide more information on how to get a copy of the report. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive overview, Christina. That was great. So as mentioned, we have this report available. It's about 100 slides long, comprising of the various countries per specific region, regional profiles, and then a global overview. The report is available at €2,995. This includes a quarterly update. So it gives you an annual subscription. So you get a total of 4 updates, including the launch, and 3 updates per annum. But if you book within 48 hours, it says 24 hours on the slide, but it's 48 hours, use the code webinar on checkout, you will get a discount of €500. So I hope we have been able to provide you a comprehensive overview of what this report really entails. It really deep dives into sort of like the government ambitions and how they are going to sort of contribute towards the development and the progress of the hydrogen industry. So that concludes sort of a session. We have some time for some questions. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat and we can pick them up as we go along. So I have a question here. Christina, maybe you can answer this, please. Which region is leading in terms of government plans put in place?
Yes, sure. Well, I would say that at the moment, the easy answer would potentially be Europe, in the sense that it has the most countries organizing and planning for hydrogen and publishing strategies. However, we've seen a lot of changes in 2021 and 2022, many new countries adopting national hydrogen strategies. And in terms of individually large players, I think it's been also clear in the report, China and the US are advancing at a very, very fast pace as well.
Great, thank you. Here's another one. It says, does the report also cover private sector projects?
Yes, sure. So the report does not cover the private sector per se. However, to concretize all these goals put in by governments and the plans, it relies heavily on the private sector and on private-public partnership. These are very much included within our country profile because they will be directly relevant to capacity building, R&D, infrastructure, new technologies. Government very often operates single-handedly on all of this. So we cover public-private partnership in this sense within every country profile. But we also have a small indication of the pipeline of private projects. So we use a pipeline of private projects as a point of reference between the aspiration and the concrete advancements that are actually happening on the ground.
Okay, great. Here's a question. Does the report purchase include access to the underlying database, list of policies, funding, list of policies 1, 2, funding, 3, trade announcements? So the availability of the report includes a slide deck, and we can make the various data points available in Excel as well. Then there is another question on where is the hydrogen refueling station rollout most prominent? Maybe you can answer that, Christina.
Yes, sure. So it's a bit similar to everything else in the sustainability spectrum. Europe has been at the forefront of sustainable mobility, and that includes the associated infrastructure. However, going forward, we will see a lot of change. And again, we expect a lot of activity from the US and China, and actually on an even much bigger scale than we've seen to date.
Yes, I think I can add a couple of things on that. I mean, infrastructure is always a little bit of an issue with the hydrogen industry. It's a bit of chicken and egg. I'm sure we've all heard it many times, chicken and egg conundrum whereas sort of like the infrastructure refueling stations, operators argue that why would I have a fueling station if there's few cars around or buses or trucks? And the car manufacturers, the car operators would say, why would we sort of manufacture all the fuel cell cars if there's little infrastructure in place? So it really requires sort of like a development on both sides. And at the moment, the infrastructure is most developed in the United States, and actually particularly in California, where there's like already quite a few hydrogen fueling stations in place. Other places are developing it as well, particularly in places like Europe and Germany. There's quite some development, and I think some parts of Asia as well. But this is still sort of like an important part that needs to get a lot more momentum in the coming year, and a lot more support as well. We believe from the governments as well to make it profitable also for operators to get into this space. Then there's a question on, have you addressed the role of government should play in the context of hydrogen, regulation, incentives, and infrastructure, etc.? I guess, so obviously we address all those items, regulation, incentives, infrastructure in the report. We do not make an assumption as to what governments should do or what sort of position they should take. So we're basically just addressing what has been sort of like announced and what has been committed and what sort of plans are in place. We do not make any judgment as to what we feel should be implemented for specific governments per se. No. And I think with that question, that wraps it up for us. Well, thank you very much for joining this session today. If you have any questions, contact us at the Hydrogen Standard here, contact@hydrogenstandard.com. You can find all the information available on the website as well. And thank you very much and hope to see you soon. Goodbye.